So back in 2018, England attempted to sell Wembley Stadium for £800 million. Now, if you remember, this was to a man called Shahid Khan. I believe I've got that right. And he is an NFL franchise owner. I think at the time anyway, he was the franchise owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know nothing about NFL, so that's as far as I'll take that. But eventually England declined it or decided to go against it. So I'm going to take a look at why they even considered it. Is it worth it? And will they ever attempt to do it again? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Gary and thank you very much for joining me on this week's episode. Right, so getting straight into this then. So as I said, back in 2018, so 2-3 years ago now, England were very, very close to selling the National Stadium for £800 million. And I remember at the time, my initial thoughts were I'm completely against it. I really was at the time, but you know, I still am against it. But let's start to have a look at why they considered it and what the benefits could have been or could still be to the England national team. So the new Wembley Stadium opened in 2007, I believe. I think England's first game was against Brazil, a 1-0 win against Brazil. But it replaced the two Twin Towers, the older stadium, and was built as English national stadium. So we've always had a national stadium. I know a lot of countries don't. For example, Spain don't have a national stadium, but you know, England did. And Wembley, as many football fans I assume around the world have heard of Wembley Stadium, know what Wembley Stadium is, often referred to as the home of football. Take from that what you will, but let's be honest, Wembley throughout the years, whether it's the old one and the new ground, has been absolutely fantastic. So there's always been an appetite in this country for England to have a national stadium. However, during the construction of the new Wembley Stadium, it was, I think it was around about 5 or 6 years it actually took them eventually from the demolition of the old stadium to the building of the new one. England obviously didn't have a home ground. So during this time, they travelled up and down the country. I remember them having games in Manchester, Middlesbrough. I think they did one in Newcastle a few times. So all of England's qualifying games throughout this time, or home games, were played all up and down above the country. And I remember, I was only young at the time, but I remember people saying, is there a need for a national stadium? Now, obviously, I still believe that I love Wembley Stadium. I think it's fantastic. I think it's good that English football has got a heart and a soul and almost an epicentre, if you like. And I see that as Wembley Stadium. However, of course, these fans were making an excellent point. You know, let's be honest. As far as a national stadium goes, from England's perspective, obviously not the UK, but England, it's not in the best place. You know, it is in London, which for many people, like some of those cities I've mentioned, let's say even Liverpool, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, even like North Yorkshire, like Leeds, anywhere above there. There's a lot of people actually that Wembley Stadium, and even for me, I live in the East Midlands, but for me to get down to a Wembley game in a midweek after work, or you know, certainly in a weekday, is very, very difficult. So from a location point of view, I remember it not being in the best place, and I also remember that being an argument about, you know, when we were building the new Wembley, should it still be in Wembley, as daft as it sounds, should this new national stadium be in somewhere like Birmingham or Manchester to make it more accessible? But they went ahead and built it back in London. No one can blame them. Like I said, it was the home of the old ground. It was going to be called Wembley. Wembley's Wembley, so it has to be in Wembley. But you know, then it came up quite recently in 2000, like I said, in 2018, that England were thinking of selling the national ground, and therefore England may potentially then be back on the road. Now, the reason why the FA was looking at selling is because it was going to be an £800 million fee. So this Shahid Khan was going to pay English football, the FA, whatever you like, £800 million. And the FA's excuse for that, or to accept that offer, was that would all be spent, or at least a substantial amount of that, would be spent on grassroots football within this country. Now, the National Stadium, Wembley Stadium, at the time, I can remember at the time there was talk it cost around £800 to £1 billion to build at the time. So if you're going back to 2002 to 2007, like I said, it's probably, in terms of how much it cost them to build and how much they was going to sell it for, doesn't make sense, particularly with it being in London. You know, house prices or general land prices in general don't go down in London, they tend to go up. So you would suggest that £800 million, it is a bit of a steal. However, obviously £800 million is an awful lot of money. So there was talk about them rebuilding grassroots facilities up and down the country. Now, when you think £800 million is a lot of money, I think actually when you put it into the context of covering the whole of England, should we say, with pitches or facilities. £800 million, surprisingly, and let's be honest, you would probably guess a vast estimate of that wouldn't go on grassroots anyway. But let's say for argument's sake it did. That money, surprisingly, would go probably pretty quickly if you're going to build any sort of substantial and sustainable facilities up and down the country. So I'm still against it. I was against it at the time. However, the pros for that are obviously England playing away from home. You know, like I said, there's a lot of other countries, probably more countries than not, actually, that don't have a national stadium. Obviously, to maintain a national stadium outside of England games is very expensive. It always will be, but London being London, it has the possibility of hosting, obviously, loads of other events. I know they've even done car racing in Wembley before, for example. But obviously, a stadium of that size is very expensive to maintain. But certainly, England travelling up and down the country is a great benefit. It also does then, when you spend such an amount of money and have such an amazing facility in Wembley, should we say, it makes it also very difficult for England to ever consider playing away from Wembley, even when it's built. So you might say, well, why can't you have both? Why can't you have the Wembley Stadium and then England still play occasionally away from home? And they have started to do that, obviously, in these warm-up friendlies before the Euros. England did play away from home. But it's not something that's common, and it's probably not going to be common, particularly for qualifiers, particularly because, England, on general, there is a need, actually, for a 90,000-seater national stadium, or as many seats as we can possibly get. I think, on average, out of almost any international team in the world, we average some of the highest regular attendances to qualifying games, anything like that. So there's certainly an appetite amongst an English public, should we say, for them to go and watch these football matches, and that's why we need a stadium of that size. I think selling the ground, though, wouldn't be a good idea. I know at the time the deal was talking about Shahid Khan buying the stadium, but then almost FA holding on to hospitality rights. I'm not sure how the deal would have worked, and that's probably why you might say the £800 million wasn't for everything. He wasn't getting everything. I think, like I said, Wembley or the FA was still holding on to some of the hospitality rights. And he did suggest that England could still play their home games there. Selling such an asset, I think the asset should remain as part of the FA. I do think it all should be nationalised, but that's for another topic. But the England football stadium, on the whole, £800 million isn't going to go anywhere. Everything is expensive now, particularly if you're not from England, particularly land. We are not a large country, so if they're going to go and spend £800 million literally buying up land across the country and then building state-of-the-art grassroots facilities on them, and they then need to be maintained, sustainable, managed, staffed, £800 million isn't going to go an awful long way, and then at the end of it, you don't even have a national stadium. So I think, given the history alone from Wembley being FA and almost, you could almost say it's public owned. I think it's within the public interest that it becomes a national asset rather than something that's privatised as well, because of the history and the heritage and almost the iconic status of Wembley Stadium to England fans and the English general public as a whole. I don't think it'd be a good idea. I don't actually know why. I have done some digging, but it's not 100% clear why he did fully pull out. There's some rumours, but I think probably amongst the general public, I remember Gary Neville at the time was very critical about the sale, saying he didn't think the £800 million would go anywhere either. But I think, I do think it's an area that I don't want to see England go again. I think Wembley Stadium alongside St George's Park as well, that's another thing that I don't want to see become privatised or someone buying. I'm going to actually do another video quite soon on St George's Park talking about the impact that has had upon our success in recent years. But I see Wembley Stadium as a national treasure, a national icon, something just doesn't matter what almost is offered, something that I feel shouldn't be able to be bought or sold generally. However, I can understand why the appeal there is for the FA. Please let me know your thoughts down below. What you think? Do you think the FA will ever try to sell Wembley Stadium again? Do you think they should? And let me know, if we did, what you think England could get for their 800 to, let's say, £1 billion in grassroots football. So yeah, just a very quick video to start getting these things rolling again, and we'll start doing a few of these, start picking up topics that I want to have a quick general discussion about and go from there. So thank you very much for joining me. Please like and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video.